Hey guys, it's Christy and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be ranking all of my Colourpop palettes from worst to best. So before we get into it, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel before you leave. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy, and let's get into it. Okay, so I don't have a ton of Colourpop palettes and I don't do a ton of Colourpop dedicated content. It's not because I don't love them. It's because shipping to Canada from Colourpop it takes a long time. So by the time I get something, Colourpop has released 5 new collections. So that is why I don't tend to review their collections, but I also know it gets overwhelming with the amount that they release. So let's just hop right into it. I do have 17, I have more than 17, but I have 17 categories because I did sort of lump one collection all together. And at number 17, I put their Love Struck collection. So this came out a couple of years ago, and this is a collection of 5 pan eyeshadows, and they're just okay. So this first one is Cherish, and this is a more cherry, pinky red type of color story. It's fine. This shimmer right here is really pretty. It's just that these tones typically aren't what I tend to go for. I don't love reds on me personally. Then there is Amore, which is more of a deep mauvey purple, which I do think this color story is beautiful. I just don't go crazy for the pressed glitter in here. That kind of deters me a little bit. We have Ballad, which is more of that smoky quad. There is 2 of these sequin shades in here, which I don't necessarily mind, but I don't love. So there's that one. And then Crush, which is a very warm toned, really pretty brownish orange kind of color story. Very pretty. This is the one I've probably used the most, and I do think it's beautiful. And then there is Lyric, which is that more neutral brown palette, also with a pressed glitter. So this collection, I just don't feel like it was their best quality. I feel like they have much better quality than these. These are fine. They're just not that special, and I think I wanted them to be something really special. So for that reason, these are ranking at the very bottom. At number 16 is a palette I thought I would really love, and this was supposed to be very 90s inspired. This is their Plush Like Me palette. So this is like my favorite size palette that they have, these 12 pan eyeshadows. You do get a mirror in this one, which I love. It's just there's something about this color story that doesn't make me want to reach for it. It does have some grungy tones, but it doesn't feel very, I don't know how to put this. I just don't feel like it was that well put together. I don't feel like it was the most well thought out color story, if that makes sense. I can see using all of the pinks together, but these 3 shades here just feel very out of place, so I feel like we need a little bit more to make that make sense. This just wasn't my favorite color story. The palette itself is beautiful, and it's got little velvet detailing, which I love. I think that's great. I just don't think this was their best work. Coming in at number 15 is the very first palette I ever had from Colourpop, and this is the Blush Crush palette. So this one is a really pretty light pink color story, and I do love a good pink. This one's fine. I feel like my shade Pop a Bottle, I think this is supposed to be a Super Shock. I feel like mine is honestly a dud. It's always been very dry. So I don't know what happened there. And I do have actually Hard Pan in the middle. This one's fine. It's pretty. It's just not one I go for that often. I much prefer making Mauves, which has that similar sort of pinky mauvey color story. It just, there's so much more impact and so much more depth out of that one than this one. So for that reason, this one is number 15. Coming in at number 14 is the Big Poppy palette. So this one actually is really pretty. This is one of their first all matte palettes, and this is definitely, as you can see, a very warm color story, very much orange leaning, and I think this is really pretty in the fall. I think it's really great range. I think it's really convenient to have if you're wanting to play with a lot more of those warmer shades. I think this is pretty. I think they did a really great job with the gradient. I don't necessarily reach for this as much as I thought I would because I just don't typically do all matte looks. I just love a good shimmer shadow. For that reason, I probably don't go in here as much as I probably could. However, the quality is great, and I think they did a great job with this color story. I just don't use it as much because it's all matte. And I knew that when I bought it. I just thought I would use it more. However, I have gained some more single shadows this year, so maybe that will make me reach into this more. Coming in number 13 is very similar to the Big Poppy. This is the Little Ray of Sunshine palette, and this is all yellowy mustard tones. And this is another one that is just all matte. I think this is very pretty. I don't typically use bright yellow eyeshadow, particularly not this yellow, but I think if you're going for a really pretty golden look, this will really do that. And I think when you get into these deeper shades, it's not so much of a yellow look so much as it is more of a mustardy brown kind of look. It's actually a lot more wearable than it looks in the pan, and especially when you get into some of those golden shades, or if you have a golden super shock and you just kind of want to put down a base for that, this is a great way to do that. That is what I tend to do with this one. I think it's pretty. It's just not one of my most reach for, much like the Big Poppy palette. I think it's great. It's great quality. It's just not one of my most used simply because this isn't the type of shade I reach for the most. But I am glad I have it in my collection, and I have used it from time to time. It's definitely come in handy when I'm reaching into those single shadow shimmer shades. Coming in at number 12 is the first mega palette of this ranking, and this is the It's a Mood palette. So this one is very pretty. This is a very pretty fall color story. This is obviously a very large palette, but this has so much color in here, such a range, and I love how it goes from some of these neutrally browns, then we get into the pinks and oranges, purples, blues, greens. It's very, very pretty for fall, and these jewel tones, just very beautiful. However, I don't reach for a lot of color, as you guys probably know. I just don't. I like having this in case I want to, in case I want to be creative, and sometimes I do, but whenever I'm being creative, it's because I want to film it. So for that reason, this one does rank a little bit lower. I just don't reach for a lot of color, although I think it's very pretty. I think the quality's great, and I think they did do a great job with the color story on this one. Okay, at number 11 is the Boudoir Noir palette. I don't know if they have this one anymore, but the packaging on this is beautiful. And it does also come with a very large mirror here, and the color story is really pretty. Definitely a little bit more on the grungy side with those greens and golds. I think it's very pretty. You do have this pressed glitter in here that I do not use. I do think this is a really pretty color story. Like I mentioned, I've also kind of figured out I'm not really huge into more grungy looks, more grungy color stories, and I don't think I fully realized that until this year. For that reason, I don't think I reach for this one as often as I did when I first got it. I really do like it. The shade Melt has quite a dip, actually. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but I've definitely used that quite a bit. I think this is pretty. It's just, I do think they could have left the pressed glitter out of here though. Not many of us are using pressed glitters, and I'll be honest, Colourpop does not have my favorite pressed glitter formula. Moving into the top 10, at number 10 is a fairly newer palette to my collection, and that is the Troublemaker palette. So I did think I would use this one a lot more when I bought it, but there was just something about this color story that I really wanted and I really had to have. I know I just said I don't like grungy color stories, and this is a little bit on the grungy side, but there's something about this purpley, pink, and gray color story. I love a good cool tone palette. I love purples. I love pinks. Sometimes I love silvers and grays. This shimmer here is very, very smooth, like the Lunar Beauty shimmer formula. He has the smoothest shimmers. I think for me to reach for this palette, I just really have to be in the mood for a darker, smokier look. I have to be in the mood for that, and I'm just not always. So that's why this one is ranking lower, but I do still think the color story is really beautiful, and I think this is probably one of my favorites that I've seen from them recently. Coming in at number 9 is another mega palette, and this is the Gone Matte palette. They did a really good job with this one. So this is, like the name suggests, an all matte palette. So you have such a great range in here. So you've got your warm shades, some neutrals, some pinks, some purples, some grays with a blue leaning gray. I think this is so great. If you're ever working out of a palette and you just happen to think to yourself, I just need this type of matte to make this complete, this will probably have it. I wonder if maybe there should have been like a green. I don't know if we needed these two brown rows. Maybe there should have been like a green matte. That would have made this better. But I overall do think this is a really solid palette. I think they did a great job. I think this is so convenient to have. I don't typically reach for this to do a full look, but I do reach for this if I ever, like I said, need a companion palette and I'm looking for that good quality companion palette that's not going to let me down and that's going to help me along. This is the one I reach for. It's very, very good for that. Coming in at number 8 is the Off Melrose palette. So this one, I think nostalgia got me on this one. The color story is beautiful. It does have a pressed glitter, but the rest of these shades are so beautiful. This is a very neutral palette. I will say the shade Fairfax is that type of blue, brown, purple shift that I really, really hate. But other than that, this palette is very, very pretty. I really love it. I love the whole design, aesthetic of the palette. The shades are beautiful. I don't really hear anybody talk about this one, but I really like this one. It's just that it's ranking at number 8 because of those 2 shades that I just do not love. Coming in at number 7 is a palette that is definitely one of my all-time favorites for the spring, and this is the So Very Lovely palette. And this is exactly as the name describes. It is so lovely. It is so pretty, so springy, so feminine. The pinks and purples are just so beautiful. These all work really well together. You do only get one shade that's going to give you a lot of depth, but when I look at this, I very much see that spring, that very light springy kind of feel. I'm very much seeing Easter when I look at this. This is definitely going to be in my basket for the spring. I just think this is so pretty. And I don't know, there's just something about these soft but colorful feminine shades. It just makes my heart happy. There's just something there. I can't help but love this one. So this one is definitely ranking pretty high and I'm going to get a ton of use out of this one come this spring. At number 6 is the last mega palette in this ranking, and this is the Stone Cold Fox palette. This one's just really good. This one's just really good if you like cool tones. I love the range in here. I love that you can steer it a little bit more pink, or you can stay pretty brown, or you can go with those grays and those really, really cool tones. I think this is just overall a really beautiful palette. This is so fun to work with because you pretty much know every look you're going to really love and enjoy. I think they did such a good job with this one. This one came out either in 2020 or 2021 when cool tone palettes were just popping off a little bit with this one. That's Taupe, the Natasha Denona Glam. They were getting so much popularity and Colourpop released this one and it's still a very good one. I still quite enjoy it. It's definitely one of their best mega palettes that they've ever released, in my opinion. Coming in at number 5 is potentially the cutest palette in my collection, and this is the Mandalorian The Child palette. So I think this is so cute. I'm not a Star Wars fan by any means, but I think they did such a great job with this one. So cute. You do get a mirror, which I love, and I love a good solid green color story. I think they did a great job with the shimmers in here. The quality is wonderful. It's just a really, really great palette. And these greens are very flattering greens. And I love that they added in a little brown here. Everything about this palette I really, really enjoy. I think it's beautiful. And this is definitely such a favorite of mine. Definitely one of my favorite green palettes as well. Coming in at number 4 is the Making Mauves palette. So I mentioned this one when we were talking about the Blush Crush palette, and this one is just much better quality. So the mauves in here are so beautiful, very flattering. I think you get a really great range of mattes and then the 3 shimmers. This is a really good ratio, I think, for a 9pan palette with the 6 mattes and 3 shimmers. However, one of these is one of those sequin shades. Overall, this palette is very, very light, but it's very pretty, very workable for every day. If you're looking to incorporate mauves into your everyday look, I think this is a great way to do that just because it is so light, but it's very high quality, super flattering, super beautiful. Definitely a favorite of mine. Coming in at number 3 is one that really got me this year. I did not realize I would love this as much as I do, but this is the Clay It Cool palette. And this one is phenomenal quality. So you do get one cream shade and the rest are mattes and shimmers. beautiful. So a lot of people have compared this to the Patrick Ta Major Dimension palette. I did recently as well, but you do only get the one cream shade, and I don't think the cream is the highest quality cream. However, the mattes in here are so good. They're so flattering. If you have blue eyes, this is the palette you need. Nothing makes my eyes pop like this palette. My eyes are never more blue than when I'm wearing this palette, and I love it. I just love the way this works with my eye color. The formula is so good. The shimmers are absolutely beautiful and reflective. I think Colourpop did such a good job with this palette. I would love, love, love to see a lot more palettes in this format. I just think they could either take out the cream formula or improve it, and this would be absolutely perfect. Coming in at number 2 is quite a recent addition to my collection, but when I show it to you, you're gonna understand why it's a favorite. This is the Not a Box of Chocolates palette. It's a neutral brown eyeshadow palette. I know this is the most boring palette I could have chosen, but it's beautiful. I love a good brown gradient with some shimmers. You get a great shade here to set down your eye primer or use as a highlight, and then you get some deep grungy browns down here. Everything about this palette I just love to pieces. So this one has just been a favorite, and the quality is up to par with all of their other palettes. It just initially seemed like one of their most boring palettes because we all have more than enough brown palettes, but it's so good. Brown is what we wear. But coming in at number 1 is one I did mention very briefly earlier, and that is That's Taupe. Something about a good taupe eyeshadow is so flattering. This gives us that. This gives us everything we need. You do get a super shock in here, which I love to see. You got 3 shimmers, and the mattes just work so well together. This is just such a well curated 9-pan palette. So flattering. Again, these taupey shades are they just work for everybody. They're so beautiful. I really enjoy this palette. This might be some of the best quality they've ever come out with, in my opinion, and definitely one of the best color stories they have ever released. And I feel like it's also just completely foolproof. You cannot mess up the look with this. It's everything I want in a smaller eyeshadow palette. And that is my ranking. I wish that all affordable eyeshadow brands caught up with Colourpop, not with how much they release. I do not want anybody releasing as much as Colourpop, but I do think their quality is so good, especially for being so affordable. And I've said many times I am a bit of an eyeshadow snob. I definitely prefer high-end eyeshadows, but sometimes the high-end brands really let you down, and sometimes the affordable brands really just pick up the slack, like Colourpop. So that is it for me today. Thank you so very much for watching. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go. I do upload at least 3 new videos every single week. And leave me a comment down below letting me know what your favorite Colourpop palette is. I love hearing from you guys. Thank you again so very much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!